Oh, this is glorious countryside. It's all right for your business development. You raise capital, build industries, construct canals, feed the workers beer. Well, speaking of which, one second. Drink the beer. We're drinking beer on the job. Nobody really knows as long as you wipe the board after. And then when you're done with that, you build more railroads and more industry and more importantly, more beer. And that's Brass Birmingham.
Brass Birmingham. You're just a wee little entrepreneur, but you're gonna make it big in polluting up this land. Will you be able to master the most VP after not one era, but 2 eras of entrepreneurship? 2 eras. That's pretty unique. Well, let's see what Shelfside thinks of this bad boy. Here's a really quick how to play. To win the game, you want to have the most victory points. Yeah, it's definitely €1. To do that, you're polluting like crazy and building Industrial Revolution tiles, like coal mines, cotton mills, or even pottery on the board. And these give you points. But another big thing is getting points from linking things together. You're going to want to drop down these connections in between cities, of which these links are worth more points equal to the hex symbols they're touching. How do you do all these things? Well, you're going to have a hand of cards to play on locations, like playing this card, Coalbrookdale, to build something in Coalbrookdale. Or you can just use this industry card to play a coal mine anywhere you're connected to. Like, hey, I got a link pointing to this place, I build here. Either way, you pay the coal mine cost of a couple measly pounds, put down your coal mine, but wait, it's face down? Every time you build something, it's face down. So you gotta do a little more work to flip them face up so they can do anything. And this tile is a coal mine, which means that you need to spend all the coal on it to flip it. How do you spend that? Well, to build other things that can cost coal. So anyone can build those other tiles to use up coal. If this new tile is in another city, the coal needs to be shipped over to them through links. Once coal is completely gone from your coal mine, you flip it over and get that income boost right now. But then how do we flip over these other types of tiles, like this cotton mill? There's no thingies on it. For these, you gotta do something called sell. Basically, you're selling to one of the merchants on the board. The Gloucester area here, it costs beer from the board, and bam, the tile flips over. Zoomed out, the gameplay is like everyone does 2 actions with their hand, draws back up to 8 cards, then collects income. But hey, the deck and your cards will eventually run out through this, and this is where many other games would feel like they end, right? In Brass Birmingham, the first time the deck runs out, the game goes into an entirely new thing, the Railroad Era. As the previous Canal Era ends, you score points for things on the board, take off a bunch of stuff, reshuffle that deck, and it's Railroad Era time, which is very similar to before, with a huge focus on building, well, railroads. And that's the basics. Play cards from your hands to do things, flip over tiles sometimes, put down connections, get richer over time, more money, and then, eventually, the game will come to an end as the Railroad Era finishes. When that finishes, well, you count up your points from all the stuff on the board. Whoever has the most points wins the game. Pros time, and oh wow, this game just looks and really does feel great. The player boards have this matte finish and are double-sided, just like this main board, which I'm not gonna flip over. Let's cut to that. There you go, shot of me turning it over. That is double-sided too. And then while playing, you're gonna be dropping all these tiles on the board. They just sound great. They also are really easy to see from afar and never get mixed up. For your turn order, well, you got these handy dandy entrepreneurs that are also easy to see. You wanna be George Washington 1 or George Washington 2? Anyways, you can just pick your actual business person from history. Yes, business person, guy or girl. And they all have a quick bio. Pretty posh looking too. There's this rustic, elegant look to all the art. And hey, even the card art for cities matches the board. The cities are actually divided into 5 colors, making them fairly easy to find with all the locations in your hand. Whenever you want to build something, the explanation for all the tiles is right next to it. So you don't have to do this goofy constant tile turning ever. The little tokens include the typical Euro boxes for iron and coal, but this thing is new, beer barrels. This is a great distinction from the other things, and it doesn't really get much better than moving around these wooden cylinders to feed your workers. And then the cash money that is easy come, easy go throughout the game just feels solid in the hand. Overall, just look at this visual design. Things are sticking up on the board when necessary, and it's just so easy on the eyes. Even when you cover tiles intentionally, the amount of resources on top is the most important thing anyways. Everything is just noticeable at a glance, all on this gorgeous backdrop. Game look good, man. Oh, and then everything just fits great in the box with included plastic bags. So now that we know that component's amazing, let's get into the actual gameplay. And yes, there's a lot of little rules in this game. But to get you started, there is an introductory game featured, and this is actually pretty cool. We 100% recommend playing with this if everyone's playing for the first time and even has its own scoring rules. That way, you're not forced to compete in a second era, because in this introductory game, you only have to play the first era. But hey, let's talk about the real business here, the business of Brass Birmingham, because, well, that's what this game is, right? You're a hungry entrepreneur. You just want to maximize your profits and expand the business the best you can. Look at all these industries you can build to exploit your workers and the land. And as you put these down, you'll find that this game just excels at having business interaction everywhere in a very logical way. As you play the game, you'll be developing the land. And yes, there's limits. There's limited space on the board. There's limited existing beer to use up. But hey, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can squabble over on the board. But in Brass Birmingham, there's this overarching theme of rising business opportunity throughout. Look, this is real land you're building on, and if someone takes your space, that might kind of suck, but look, they're actually opening up the board. When you pay for things in Brass Birmingham, oftentimes you have to use resources, and look at that. Your opponents just supplied some for you. Now you don't have to build a coal mine. Or look, they just got you one step closer to that merchant, so now you can sell to them a bit earlier. Brass Birmingham does a fantastic job of depicting that this type of business is not a zero-sum game. People are just constantly creating. That's more coal in the game. Then they're connecting. Really, the board ends up feeling like this growing flower or growing smaller flowers as the opportunities just keep rising up and up and up. Right, so when actually playing turn to turn, what does that mean? Well, you always have to pay attention to what others are doing on the board. Resources of coal, iron, and beer can just be flying from the board, turn after turn as cities transform and transform again. And what happens when the resources deplete from someone else's tile? Well, that's one of the main parts of the game, the flipping a tile over. That's the net positive going on in the game, where Mr. Entrepreneur A wants to build something with someone else's resources, but hey, person B wanted those resources to be used anyways. Look at that income boost. You're frequently excited for other people's turns while playing this game, because who knows what they'll do to help your economy. Will they build beer you need to sell stuff with? Will they extend links to make it easier for you to sell your unsold goods? Will they be the hero your economy needs and flip both your iron and coal tiles? Like, freaking cha-ching. Seriously, how can I put into words how good it feels to have your tiles flipped at the right time? Like, cha-ching, that's cash. Oh, by the way, your income moves up right away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do it again. Oh, cha-ching, that's cash. You entrepreneurs will keep getting more and more connected as the eras progress, where there's game states where you can always take from each other. That includes the beer that people really need to use to sell. But then that's flipping their beer brewery and raising their income. The interconnectedness of players just really raises that question of how will the resources I'm supplying affect others? Do I even want to build an ironworks if it helps my opponents too much? Early on, maybe you just need the income and don't mind supplying your opponents. And then late eras, maybe you just have a little too much money and let your opponents supply their own iron. Make them do the work for once. Oh, so what do you do if no one wants to supply iron or coal themselves and there's none on the board? Well, you can always choose to buy cubes from this marketplace. If you ever want to or have to, you can choose to buy some cubes here for a bit of a price. This works with supply and demand mechanics where Sometimes you'll be paying £1 for one piece of coal, maybe £2 later on. But later on, you might be paying £10 for just 2 lumps of coal. And these cubes in the market are gone once you spend them. And there's only one way to get them back in, which is to build a tile. And then the cubes that would go onto here, these actually just go right into the market. But would you want them to go right into the market? Do you care about having the instant flip if you can gouge your opponents to keep those coal prices really high? This market really seeps across in late game, where you need the resources but are rushed for time. And then you gotta spend. And keep spending insane, exorbitant prices if no one, including you, wants to help out the resource market. Or how about this? Sometimes you want to deliberately underspend or overspend compared to your opponents. See, the more money you spend, put a couple more there, the earlier you get to go in the next round as you rearrange these homies according to how much money they spent in the previous round. And this ordering can really matter when you're trying to piggyback off certain players for, say, a coal, or go first so that you can sell before anyone else grabs your precious beer. So keep tabs on your opponent's income, otherwise you might just get totally smashed in a round by going last, and all the best link spots are taken. As a whole, you're always watching each other and building each other up. It just ends up being inefficient to try to do the entire supply chain from the ground up. And Brass Birmingham just keeps telling you to be realistic and adapting to your friend's actions for efficiency. Sure, there are ways for dirty counterplay, like building in a location really early and then selling as fast as you can to grab someone else's beer they really wanted for free, or just building in a key location someone's been eyeing for the last couple rounds. But dedicating yourself to continually messing over other people just isn't encouraged because it's inefficient and will tank your own economy. You don't do a hostile takeover of someone else's cotton mill. Rather, just build off of it. There's opportunity everywhere, even if it was initially a counterplay against you. Let's say someone is winning really hard. Well, actually, maybe you want to say thank you to that guy. Him winning doesn't necessarily hurt you, and look at all that opportunity he made for you. This is business where you can use their connections. If they're stacking a city, why not just build links to get points off of their buildings? Brass Birmingham is set up in a way where you don't have any incentive to destroy someone's economy. Destruction doesn't net you any points, and even if you try to squeeze someone dry, everyone has so many options anyways. You never eat bad turns in Brass Birmingham with the 5 different actions you can do. What's related to the low cut-throughness is that Brass Birmingham does a really good job of muddying who's winning, even though there's technically open scoring. You know all the income that people are getting at the end of every turn? That is an indicator of success, but money only helps you buy things. It's not points at the end of the game. The second marker is this VP marker that doesn't really move until the end of eras. So it's more like you have a hunch on how people are doing that makes extended punishment extremely rare. Even if you sit there and count every single tile and link on the board, you really can't accurately guess what people are going to do because you don't know what's in their hand, and even if you did, cards can be used for so many things. Can you perfectly factor in whether someone will be able to flip a tile before the era ends? How about someone building a railroad to mooch off of the tile points that someone else built? Yeah, good luck with counting all that, buddy. Real quick thing, taking loans. This is excellently handled, where at any time you can just take an action for a loan to get £30 interest free. The only consequence is that you move down by 2 income levels. Yes, that can put you in the negative, but you can basically buy anything now. This keeps your options always open, even late game, and really gives you more flexibility on how you want to approach your economy. Another unique thing about Brass Birmingham is that it has 2 eras, not 2 rounds, 2 eras of the game that go back to back, a canal era and a railroad era. This is phenomenally done and adds some really cool progression to this game. Let's start with that canal era, where you are a little more relaxed, canals are cheaper to buy to link things, and you can't even link every space yet. You're trying to balance between scoring points with weak tiles, getting a healthy income, and also positioning well on the board for next round, especially factoring in that how all the tier 1 tiles and canals are going to get wiped at the end of the era. Then, oh man, choo-choo, railroad era time with the new hand. And this is where the pedal to the metal starts. Everyone wants to connect, because the point payoff will be amazing. Sure, they cost £5 and a coal, but that's lunch money by now. How about spending £15, 2 coal, and a beer to build 2 railroads for 1 action? I can afford that. There's that city of Birmingham. Hey, that's the name of this game. Of course I want to build a ton of railroads to it. I'm gonna get points. Like, look at all those tiles in there. That's like 7 points per railroad at the very least. Yep, so players basically just empty their wallets late game to build railroads in this spike of adrenaline in that second era. Because this is an economic game, well, your income was steadily rising anyways, so you can definitely afford to make some big plays later on. And your player board in front of you was progressing this entire time. Industry is just upgrade as you build to unlock those higher tiers. The better ones not only give you more points, but sometimes more income too when flipped. As everyone is just rolling in with the higher income later in the game, it's not surprising to see game states where income is just jumping by maybe 4 to 5 spaces every other turn. Just remember that every industry is going to be different in its payouts and also how many tiles it has per tier. These eras might come to an end quicker than you might think because you have this deck of cards and the cards in your hand, that's it. Meaning that you'll have 16 actions per player at 4 people. 16 actions. That's not a whole lot of time. You're playing cards and then drawing from the ever dwindling deck, and eventually this deck of cards will run out and you'll have not that many cards left in your hand with the more and more stacked board for more opportunities. That central deck runs out and then you play the tighter game of calculating. I have 6 cards left in my hand, so that's 3 turns with 2 actions each. Can I really flip all my tiles before the era ends? And that's the thing again with the eras. The board state is not going to be like this for long because at the end of the canal era, a bunch of tiles and connections are going to clear, making people with slow starts being able to catch up, and then also keeping that board state not so crazy, right? Euro fans will probably want to play this again and again. And when you're drawing the new hands, well, there's not really any such thing as a terrible hand. Every card has a use, including just discarding it for an action or discarding it to get these wild cards. For the board itself, the merchants will accept different goods with these changeable tiles, and that really dictates on how you want to build. The merchants have different bonuses on what they give you, and sometimes you get one location with blank tiles, other times they'll buy anything. In general, you're encouraged to take a creative approach to every game with how flexible the actions are. Maybe you just take a bunch of loans instead of focusing on income growth. Maybe you don't build any canals at all. Maybe you don't spend any money yet and stall to see where your opponents go first. A good way to do this is actually this action we didn't talk about yet called develop. This is when you develop these tiles, spending iron on the board to just remove buildable tiles, which will unlock the next tier of tile. You don't even have to build it. Factor in that you can do this up to twice every time you do it, and then you can do the same action twice in a turn. So then how about taking your entire turn to just remove 4 tiles from your board? That's putting you ahead in technology without building anything. But hey, all of these strategies are going to depend on player count. We're playing at 1v1, it's just going to be so much different from playing a 4-player game. You just can't rely on the same strategies anymore when there's more or less people influencing the economy. You'll have to decide what tiles you want to prioritize every time you start a game of Brass Birmingham. Whatever count you do play with though, don't worry, the game is just as balanced. All you have to do for lower player counts is take out some of the cards from this deck and the map will shrink because of that. Now these industrial age pollution shenanigans have a lot going on. Like look, there's all these different tiles, these links, and resources, all in 2 eras, right? But for all the little rules in here, Brass Birmingham really does have an extremely clean turn flow that leads to a silky smooth gameplay. All you're doing on your turn is 2 actions, both of which require you to spend 1 card, and then you just refill your hand. Then you get income. For the next round, you're just switching the turn order and then you just go again. Like how about the victory points? You only really have to move the VP markers at the end of eras, and that's when you have to clean up the board anyways. For all of the tiles, cubes, and beer barrels you see, you actually are never taking them into some type of stash. For your own personal collections, you're only touching your hand of cards and then money, which, hey, who the heck is gonna complain about holding money, right? While your player board can look intimidating to newcomers, you're only ever taking stuff off of it. And remember, you only have to pay close attention to the lowest tiles anyways. To wrap up the pros, we want to say that this theme meets the gameplay amazingly. This countryside board is going to get wrapped up with the change of the Industrial Revolution as you build all these tiles, and then you're utilizing shipping lanes, and you're even paying your workers, which help you sell, with beer. I can even prove it with the rulebook, where it's featured as a historical aside. Actually, that's it. A lot of the industries in this game just feel thematic. Like pottery's expensive, and you can't rush its R&D, so you can't always use the develop action on it, but it has crazy point payouts. Coal mines give great income, are essential to the game's economy, but by themselves suck for getting points. They're not very fancy. Ironworks give more points and can be sold to anywhere because iron was historically carried by horseback. That again was mentioned in the rulebook as a historical aside. Anyways, every action is influenced by the economy that the players create to some degree. And remember, building things doesn't mean anything if it's not connected to anything else. So link to move stuff in this game with the boats and railroads. Hey, but the game is not perfect. Now we get to the cons. And the one that jumped out is the learning experience. Oh my gosh, this rulebook, it does look really nice. It looks great. But the ordering is just kind of like, what? It feels like stuff was just slotted in randomly. So open up the rulebook, no table of contents by the way, and yay, we get our George Washingtons, which is cool. But why isn't this at the end? Hey, are you opening up the rulebook for the first time? How about an introductory game? By the way, it's all the way on the very last page on the bottom corner. The introductory game isn't alone in the back. There's also understanding the networks, which is so important and needs to be discussed earlier. It's kind of like this rulebook is like, it really is. What would get it more like that is a table of contents, an index, and a fact, as well as reordering everything to make it more coherent. Sure, there is a things to remember section, but it's not exactly too easy to follow, and come on, just give us the question answer format in a fact. For such a well-designed game overall, this rulebook is it's tearing me apart. But okay, that's it for the cons. Now it's time for the nitpicks. The first one is that these income and VP markers, while nice to move around and they're made out of wood, they're just a little too similar looking for our liking. Maybe something along the lines of a circle and then a square would have helped during the heat of economic planning so you don't get a slight scare if you accidentally mix them up. But hey, this is pretty nitpicky. Then let's look over here. There is this thing on the board and this mostly makes sense, okay? Until you see an arrow with a hat? A top hat. What does this hat mean? Is it this guy? No, that doesn't mean anything. What is this? What? You can just ignore this and the game is not affected at all, but there's that nagging question at the back of our heads that what does a top hat mean? Because it's not explained anywhere in the rules. Eventually, after some mental gymnastics, we figured out that a top hat means that your beer can get teleported anywhere. Your beer. So the top hat means you, I guess. Yeah. Going off of the symbol thing, the game does have player aids, and they do explain everything well. Like, hey, they even explain the count of cards in the game. But we would say that everything is just so small. Like, look at that size 3 font. What were they thinking, man? Okay, last little nitpick. This game is just gonna be over 2 hours with 4 people. Not 2 hours max like the box suggests. It's gonna be more like 3 hours, even when you get all the rules down. Remember how the game is encouraging adaptation and you can't really plan too far ahead? When it comes to your turn, you might just want to rethink your hand and then count all the coal on the board to make sure you got that play right. Remember, this game length is more from the players thinking more on their turns, not from the game structure itself, because you're always playing cards. And then you're drawing cards. Then when that deck runs out, the era is going to come to an end. Now it's time for the recommender score, where we try to critically evaluate the game given the aforementioned pros and cons. And Brass Birmingham is gonna get a 9 out of 10. It is excellent. Let's get that ugly out of the way first. This is not an easy learn. You're probably gonna wanna use some type of outside learning aid, because this rulebook by itself, it's not really cutting it. There's all these things you're gonna encounter in the two eras, from selling, connecting, building, and even clearing the board of tiles. First game hiccups can look like this. Hey, remember you can't actually build there because it's not connected to any coal in your network. Network? Wait, so I can just build there where I have coal, right? Yes, in the railroad era that would be the case, but in the canal era, which we're in right now, you can only have one industry per town. Oh. Oh yeah, then one more thing, actually. All your tier 1 industries that you just put down, oh, that's actually all of yours, they're all gonna get deleted from the board after the end of the era, which is it's coming up pretty soon, actually. Flip to the back of the rulebook and start with that introductory game. But it's worth it. It's worth it. See, there's something so fascinating about this game that it feels so coherent once you put it all together. And the elegance of overall game flow should strike as soon as you finish your first full game. You just jump into your opening hand, scour the beautiful board for opportunities, all while adapting turn after turn as your opponents expand. Whether it be the balanced card drawing, unique double air progression, or just loving the I scratch your back, you scratch my back efficiency, this game is an economic delight. And we have to stress that for how dense it is never punishing at all. If you're not that into this economic building Euro thing and 2 to 3 hours seems a little too much alongside for you, I think you should still try this. Try it out. This masterful design actually has a lot of contradictions when zoomed out. It is heavy with a lot of rules, but has low bookkeeping and a very smooth turn structure. It is interactive while not cutthroaty. You draw cards for actions, but aren't forced to use their fronts and can discard them instead. It highly rewards repeat plays, but doesn't have any wacky card abilities that would frustrate a newcomer. It is long, but that is divided into 2 segments, and the decks will run out to not make anything drag. And the competition is frequently exciting because even though the scoring is public, you can't really tell who is winning mid-game because of how dynamic the scoring is. But for how tense the scoring can be, and how interactive everything is, we never really talked about any big turnaround moments in the pros, huh? The board will clear between eras, which is huge, but your overall structure is still always 2 actions. 2 actions. 2 actions. There's no special phases where you're doing extra combos or crazy moves to just dominate others. It's still always just playing 2 cards. If you are the type of business person who just wants to beat your friends down to a pulp and feel like a champion as you accrue all the cash while your opponents flail and grovel, this is not it at all. Go for food chain magnate if you're into beating your opponent's economy to the Great Depression while jumping to an insane amount of actions with all your employees. Just remember that Brass Birmingham doesn't focus on huge moments where you just sell everything or just outspeed your opponents through an aggressive build expansion. This game is just not that flashy, just like its art. It takes its time with the income acceleration, ramping up bit by bit as tiles flipped, and giving you time to pivot out of mistakes or your freaking friends guzzling that beer before you. There's this optimistic take on business, where you can always adapt to improve. Maybe Colbertdale instead of Duxley, and just build a coal mine. Or an ironworks. Or maybe just put down some new connections. Just don't get engrossed with one idea too hard, because you can always take a couple more loans and snipe your friends' locations at Birmingham itself. Anyways, this deserves all the praise it gets, and it fits just into this small box. Space efficient. Just try it if you're interested. My personal score for Brass Birmingham is gonna be, I don't really like Euros that much, right? A 10 out of 10! A 10 out of 10! 10 out of 10. This one just caught me off guard. I knew I would like it, the theme checked out for me, just not to this crazy extent. I normally don't gravitate towards Euros, especially long ones, because of a couple of these things. Number 1, not enough interaction. I was partially true on this. Yes, the game is not cutthroaty, but I've deemed that it is sometimes really advantageous to go out of your way to snipe someone's location that they really need and you partially need, and that's enough conflict for me. But what I underestimated was how good the positive interaction feels in this game. It feels so good. It feels incredibly satisfying to end your turn and have someone use your stuff and then your income goes up. And then you collect that income at the end of that round. This actually has made me really happy for my opponent's turns, which is something I don't normally feel in games. And then I'm also looking out to see what they need to see if they can give me more feel-good flippage. Then number 2, too long. So yeah, this game is pretty long. It's 3 hours. And it doesn't have an epic scope like Raising Civilizations like in Civilization, or a gripping story like Mansions of Madness. But do you see this deck of cards over here? This runs out actually pretty fast, and then so you gotta scramble to make it work within your era. The game has always felt fast to me because of how the deck diminishes twice, and then consider that you can never have a bad turn because of the options, and I'm always thinking and having an eye on the game end. Okay, next one, too brain burny. See, this game was just a giant pain in the butt to learn, but once I got it down, it actually felt very clean to me. I love how simple and clean the bookkeeping is. You're just getting money and then spending money. You're not dealing with all these little resources or multiple types of cards in the game. There's just money, and then of course, your one hand of cards. Income typically only ever goes up by large amounts when it does go up, and you don't even reset it with the dual eras. The options are somewhat limited by your hand, so I'm never thinking about everything on the board. But really, the best part on the double eras is that it wipes a lot of the first era tiles and links, so you have a pretty clear canvas to analyze for the next era. And that era in turn doesn't get too crowded because the game eventually comes to an end. Oh, and then when each era does come to an end, your hand is getting smaller too. So that's limiting your options to reduce that burn. For my opponents, it's really easy to keep track of them based off of the colors on the board, and I never have to check their player boards because their specialties are all in one central area, the board itself. I never end up going down one rabbit hole of thinking too deeply to make me irritated when something goes wrong. If you don't take my coal mine, well, I can just take a loan to raise more funds. And then if you flip my coal mine earlier than I thought, then that's awesome. More business opportunities for both of us. Are we the bad guys for polluting like crazy? Maybe, but we're getting rich, right? And the last one, obvious winners. Now this game doesn't really have that despite tiles having public VP because of how fast people can get points when things go their way. Couple that with how everyone has their own hidden hand of cards, and I am just not keeping track of other people's points much to keep endgame scoring consistently tense. I also really like how these VP markers are not really being moved until end of eras, which means that every single end of era is this another exciting rush to count everyone's tiles and connections to see who wins. When we go beyond these solutions to my normal reservations, the story just keeps getting better. The progression of upgrading tiles is incredibly satisfying to me, especially considering I don't quite know when or how they'll flip sometimes, making building them even more exciting. And physical bits really do matter in board games, and this game's components just feel great. Just listen to that. I just feel myself so immersed in the class of Brass Birmingham, with the luscious art on the boards. And then these cards look amazing, and even the names have really grown on me. Stoke-on-Trent, Coalbrookdale, Nuneaton. It just sounds so cool to me after I've played this game a bunch of times. I love it when I'm flipping tiles and seeing the cash accrue in front of me as I constantly adapt to opponents. Again, for all the stuff going on in this game, it is somehow not brain burning at all. It must be how coherent the visuals are, mixed in with the constant delight of flipping the thick tiles. I feel energized even after playing this game, which is not really something I can say for a lot of long games I like. The cards, the art, the components, the strategies, they just keep filling me with delight. Brass Birmingham, I just want to play it again. As always, thanks to all our patrons for making videos like this possible. We got Manuel G, Brian C, Clifford H, Aaron W, Max B, Bora, Jeremy M, C, Charlie P, Quinton S, Sam S, Travis R, Admiral Y, Bobsy K, Ryan D, Jennifer L, Brett M, Matt G, Peter Z, Spinner 71, Ryan J, Brad G, Tiago, Period, Mark A, James M, Evan B, Charles B Jr., Josh J, Bassbar, Rodo, Sophie, Reiner Z, Colin Allen, Hudson T, Pearson B, Omar F, MY, and Ethan P. We also got 2 Mad Lads of Cardboard, we got ZL and Jeff L, we got this guy right there. We also got our Mad Lady of Cardboard, Amy. Thank you guys so much. As always, we got our Patreon link in the description below, and see you guys around the Discord server there. This was Brass Birmingham. Let me know what games you want us to review. This game is we just like it so much. Whew. Anyways, remember to like and sub to the video if you like content like this. See you guys for the next board game videos. Bye-bye.